In October of 1904, the most powerful fleet Russia had ever assembled opened fire in the middle of the night. Searchlights swept the dark water. Guns thundered for 20 minutes. When the smoke cleared, they had sunk one enemy vessel. It was a British fishing boat. The men in the water were fishermen from Hull hauling their nets. The fleet had just attacked trawlers and nearly started a war with the most powerful empire on Earth. And here is the astonishing part. That was only the first week. This fleet still had 18,000 miles to sail. This is the story of the voyage of the damned. To understand how it came to this, you have to go back to the war Russia was losing. In February 1904, Japan launched a surprise attack on the Russian naval base at Port Arthur on the Pacific coast. Russia's Far East fleet was bottled up and being ground down. The Tsar's advisors reached for a desperate solution. Russia had another fleet, the Baltic Fleet, sitting on the wrong side of the planet. The plan was simple to say and almost impossible to do: sail it around the world, through waters where Russia had almost no friendly ports, and crush the Japanese Navy. The fleet was renamed the Second Pacific Squadron. It left the Baltic port of Libau on the 15th of October, 1904. Some of its battleships were brand new, so new the builders were still aboard finishing them. Others were old, slow, and barely seaworthy. Most of the crews were raw recruits, some of whom had never been to sea. The fleet was terrified before it even cleared Europe. Rumors swirled that Japanese torpedo boats were lying in ambush in the North Sea, an ocean away from Japan. Nerves snapped on the night of the 21st of October at a fishing ground called Dogger Bank. A repair ship named the Kamchatka, straggling behind the fleet, radioed that she was under attack by torpedo boats. She wasn't. But minutes past midnight, when the main fleet came upon small silhouettes in the darkness, the warships lit their searchlights and opened fire. The silhouettes were British trawlers. The trawler Crane was sunk. At least 2 fishermen were killed and others wounded. In the confusion, Russian battleships even shelled their own cruiser, the Aurora. Britain erupted. The Royal Navy shadowed the Russian fleet with cruisers, guns trained. For a few tense days, the world's largest empire seriously weighed war. Russia apologized, paid compensation, and was allowed to sail on, humiliated before it had even left the Atlantic. And the Kamchatka was just getting started. While separated from the fleet, she had fired more than 300 shells at a Swedish steamer, a German trawler, and a French schooner. She hit none of them. For the rest of the voyage, the fleet's most dangerous enemy was arguably its own repair ship. But the deeper enemy was coal. Britain controlled most of the world's coaling stations, and after Dogger Bank, Russia could expect no favors. So the fleet met German colliers at sea and loaded coal by hand, sack after sack in tropical heat. Coal was crammed everywhere, on decks, in washrooms, and cabins, until the ships rode low and filthy in the water. Sailors' memoirs describe men collapsing in the heat, coal dust in every breath, and morale rotting with every mile. In January 1905, the fleet anchored at Nosy Be, off Madagascar, and there it sat for more than 2 months, waiting for reinforcements it did not want. The news that arrived was crushing. Port Arthur had fallen. The very base they were sailing to relieve no longer existed. The mission was now, by any military logic, pointless, but the Tsar ordered them on. In the tropical anchorage, discipline dissolved. Accounts from officers describe funerals held almost daily as disease spread, and sailors bringing aboard a menagerie of exotic animals. Gunnery practice went so badly that by some accounts the fleet nearly hit its own ships more often than the targets. Admiral Rozhestvensky, a man famous for hurling binoculars into the sea in rage, watched his command decay around him. Then they sailed on, across the Indian Ocean, through the South China Sea, 7 months and 18,000 miles from home. On the 27th of May, 1905, the fleet entered the Tsushima Strait between Korea and Japan, hoping to slip through fog to the Russian port of Vladivostok. Waiting for them was Admiral Togo and the Japanese combined fleet, rested, drilled, and fighting in home waters, The battle that followed was one of the most one-sided in naval history. Japanese gunners fired faster and straighter. Within hours, 4 Russian battleships had gone down. Rozhestvensky was wounded and captured. The Kamchatka, true to form, sank with all hands. By the next day, the 2nd Pacific Squadron had effectively ceased to exist. Of the entire armada, only a handful of vessels, by most accounts a small cruiser and 2 destroyers, limped into Vladivostok. Around 4,800 Russian sailors were dead, and roughly 6,000 more were prisoners. Japan, by most accounts, lost 3 torpedo boats and around 100 men. Months later, Russia signed a peace treaty. Within months of that, revolution was shaking the empire. The voyage of the 2nd Pacific Squadron is easy to laugh at, the fleet that fought fishing boats and lost. But look closer and it is something sadder. Thousands of ordinary men, badly trained, badly led, and sent around the world by an empire too proud to admit the mission was doomed. They shoveled coal in the tropics and died in a strait most of them could not have found on a map. Empires rarely fall in a single day, but sometimes in a single voyage you can watch one begin to sink. If you enjoyed this, subscribe. There's a new deep dive every week.